So welcome everyone again. This is Barb Barrowman. I'm one of the partner sales executives out of the North Central region. Excited to host our office hours on security, privacy, control, and compliance in the cloud today with Jeff Stoffel from our TS2 team. So today we're going to be talking about security, privacy, control, and compliance that you can gain by moving to the cloud. Our goal here is to educate you on the benefits of the Microsoft Cloud, so that you guys can craft a compelling message for your SMB customers. So for almost all the industries, the cloud changes how people work, where people are working, and of course the best ways that people do business. With the emergence of the cloud computing, today's IT organizations are playing an increasingly important role in driving their business strategy. So while cost reduction is still a top priority, scalability and business agility has stepped to the forefront for the IT decision makers. As a result, spending on cloud solutions is expected to grow approximately 30% from 2013 to 2018, and that's compared with 5% overall growth for enterprise IT. So obviously we think this is a good area to develop a practice and develop services around these solutions. So as partners, you may talk with many of your CIOs who maybe are a little hesitant yet to fully embrace a cloud-first approach. Their hesitation stems in part from anxiety over a wide range of privacy, control, and security-related issues. They may feel their data is more secure in their data center where they can keep control. So unfortunately, many of these SMBs cannot afford to spend the dollars that are needed on security and compliance, and that control can now become a legal liability for them. Everyone is aware of the hack at Target, and this was determined to actually be a breach by the HVAC company whose credentials were compromised, and this HVAC company, of course, was an SMB. Now, rather than spending time on working on support for his HVAC customers, the president of this company now is facing criminal and civil charges for this breach and defending their security controls to the rest of their customers in hopes that they are not going to be leaving them as a customer out of those concerns. CIOs are placing a huge burden on their IT staff to be these security experts now. So just as you outsource your legal counsel, SMBs don't keep an attorney on staff. We need to educate them on outsourcing their security expertise. And by this I mean using all the certifications and expertise that Microsoft has built in our data centers as your security blanket. So today the Microsoft Cloud infrastructure supports more than 1 billion customers in 127 countries. Drawing on this history and scale, Microsoft has implemented software development with enhanced security, operational management, and threat mitigation practices, helping it to deliver services that achieve higher levels of security, privacy, and compliance than most of our customers could achieve on their own. Microsoft's cloud services provide a trusted platform with the flexibility and the control customers need from on-premises to public cloud for every classification of data. Businesses make the choice about what happens to their data and services used to manage and protect it. As we look at this slide, I really like to point out that the privacy is by design. So when you entrust your data or when you entrust your customers' data to Office 365, they remain the sole owner of that data. They retain the rights and the title and the interest in the data that is stored in Office 365. It's not our policy to mine the data for advertising purposes. And the only thing we're using our data for is to provide these cloud productivity services. So I think that's something really important to stress to your customers as you're talking with them. As we look at the built-in security that I had mentioned earlier of what we're doing for that, we kind of have two different areas for that. We have our service level capabilities that include the technical capabilities, the operational procedures, and the policies that are enabled for customers using the service. And then we also have our customer controls that include features that enable you to customize the Office 365 environment based on the specific needs of your organization. So if there are certain things that from a data loss prevention you want to set up, such as social security numbers not being able to be sent out via email, that's something that you can customize for them. And as we look at the security landscape today, we can see that this is a major concern for all of the SMBs out there. This is not something anymore that they can say, oh, this is not going to happen to me, or I can just avoid this. It is something that, unfortunately, we're seeing, much more commonplace even in our SMBs. And as we look at making the sense of all the threats that are out there, we can see that we have 3 different areas that we can look at for ours. We have our outsider threat, we have our insider threat, and our end user threat. So as we look at the ways that Microsoft and Office 365 can help you, the key ones that I want to point out is the preventing of the breach and all of the security and compliance and controls that we put in to ensure that that data is going to stay safe and that our data centers will stay safe. And then also on the customer control side, again, as I mentioned before, the data loss prevention and encryption that we can put in to help the customers secure their environment. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, and then he's going to talk a little bit more in technical detail on these services. Go ahead, Jeff.
Appreciate that. So real quickly, what I'm going to highlight on here really are 4 different areas that we think are critical when we're talking about a cloud solution and how we can make it a trusted foundation to build a customer's business on. That being, those 4 items being really security, privacy and control, transparency, and compliance. So obviously we want to make sure the data is secure, we want to get it to the cloud, we want to keep it private, we want to make sure that the person that owns that data retains ownership of it and has full control over it. We want to be fully transparent with where that data lives, how that customer can manage it. And of course, as we deal with more and more customers, they may have different security, or I should say different compliance requirements. Maybe it's a healthcare organization, they need a HIPAA, BAA, etc. So we need to understand compliance and how that resides, or how that takes place in the Microsoft Cloud. So those are the few things I want to talk about with you here today. First thing we want to touch on is a little bit about how we address network security. Certainly we have the perimeter network. We always make our forward-facing servers separated from our back-end servers so that should the customers that need to reach the services, they only reach the front-end services directly. We then have routers in place to protect the additional access to the databases behind those servers. So we segment our network in multiple layers, even with our Office 365 service, to prevent attacks and to minimize the surface area. Another thing that's important to note is how we handle the applications themselves. I mean, we consider the fact that we designed a lot of this the software from ground up. We deploy the latest security tools to keep the server safe from things such as malware, viruses, etc. We use technology such as App Blocker to ensure only whitelisted processes will run on the servers, and we follow a secure development lifecycle that we actually helped create a number of years back in all of our security, managing all of our cloud-based products. We automate as much as possible for routine activities so that there's less room for any sort of human error, and we also limit the permissions to just the permissions that particular user needs. For example, if we needed to get a person into the environment, we're going to give them just the minimum permissions they need to do their particular task, and then once they're through with that task, their permissions are taken away. We audited all of our operator accesses and actions. All of that's recorded. So there's a lot of things we're doing on the back end to ensure that the application and the host is secure. Going a little bit further into that notion of allowing an engineer access to the environment to do a particular task, all of our engineers, for example, go through background checks. They're fingerprinted. They've been through intensive security trainings. So it's not just a temporary employee obviously going in there to do this. This is someone that this is their job. If they need to get in for any particular reason and actually access your data or a customer's data physically or virtually, they have to go through an approval process. So there has to be a request put in for why they need access. That approval or that request is then goes through an approval process, and then we grant them just the amount of access they need to perform that particular task. Once that task is completed, their access is revoked. So that's the notion of our just-in-time access, and again, it's limited to just what they need when they need it. Another thing we'd like to talk about is data isolation. Obviously, we want to be able to take advantage of the cloud and the allowing multiple customers within a single isolated multi-tenant service. So we want to be able to isolate their data from each other. So obviously we want to take advantage of that multi-tenant service, but at the same time we want to ensure all the data is isolated for each individual customer. We want to also ensure that their data is encrypted. So we use different techniques to encrypt data both at rest and in transit, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in another slide here coming up. As far as data isolation goes, one of the reasons that we are scalable and that we can, so let's talk a little bit about data encryption and how we handle that. So each file actually we can encrypt with its own key, and then subsequent updates to the file are each encrypted using their own unique key as well. So if we have a really large file, it's actually going to be split into chunks, and each chunk is going to have its own encryption key. So what you can do with this, or what will happen then too, is these organizational files will be distributed amongst multiple Azure storage containers. Each are going to have their own credentials as well. So rather than storing all of them in a single database, they're going to be spread out throughout different databases. Their encryption keys themselves are going to be encrypted. So by keeping these files across different locations, physically separating the master encryption key from both the content and the file map, and then doing this per file encryption, it vastly reduces the risk of unauthorized access to any sort of data. So if anyone has questions about, how are you encrypting the data? How are you making sure that when I save something to OneDrive for Business, it is really secure? I would go down this path with them, because it really is a unique differentiator on how we handle that encryption at those files. So now let's go to that assume breach slide.
Okay, I'm there.
So one thing that also I wanted to highlight on is when we design our systems, we do believe that they're very secure. We have obviously all the firewalls and routers and whatnot in place, and all the intrusion detection systems in place, but again, no system is 100% secure fundamentally. So what we do is we assume breach. We have a technology, or not a technology, but an assumption that we make that someone can get into our environment somehow, although it's highly, highly unlikely. We want to make that assumption so that we properly prepare for it. So what we do is we essentially have two different teams. We have a red team and a blue team that periodically will do testing within the environment to try and do reconnaissance and get information out of the solution and see if they can find vulnerabilities. So the red team would primarily do that, while the blue team is watching and looking to see what they're doing and try and find them and try and stop them. And then when they're through with this exercise, they'll report what they found, and then they will go ahead and turn that into our security team to obviously fix any issues that may have been identified, or at least provide a report of what was attempted and how it did or did not work. So I think that's a nice technique that we do as well. So then let's move a little bit into the compliance slide here. So
Jeff, can I interrupt real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to make sure everyone's looking for the deck. Can I just make it available to everyone, or was there anything we had to do to it?
No, it should be, the one we're presenting is fine. So if we just want to upload that as presentable content, that'd be great.
Excellent. All right, everyone,
or
I'll release it
downloadable.
out shortly.
Yep. So a little bit about compliance and security. So, obviously there's a lot of different standards out there, and we've met a lot of them. The ones that I always like to hit, especially around Office 365, when we're talking to customers, they may say, I'm working with a healthcare organization, we need a HIPAA BAA. Certainly that's something we could handle. It's also important to note, like ISO 27001 and SOC 1 and SOC 2 compliance. These are all different compliance needs that different customers may have a request for, or maybe they don't even need it, but they just want to know if we have it. So it's important to note that we do have a ton of these certificates and a ton of these standards, and we put the work in the background in order to accommodate that. And there's a site that I'm going to be referencing here shortly that will have links to all of these different things that we've achieved. So one thing to look at, how do we match, or how do we get to compliance? So Barb, I'm actually on the how does Office 365 meet compliance slide now. We have a common set of different capabilities that we provide around compliance. So certainly what we're going to do is we're going to go through the physical security. We're going to make sure the buildings are secure. We're going to be following security best practices. We're going to be doing data encryption, as we mentioned, both in trans and at rest. But then we allow the customers, too, to add a lot of policies on top of that or controls upon top of that to meet their own compliance needs, such as data loss prevention, rights management service, role-based authentication and controls. And then once you have all of these customer controls and combined with a service capability, when you consider all of this, we have over 1,000 different controls in place with Office 365 to meet all of these different certifications that are out there. So by combining the customer controls with our capabilities, you can get the ISO certifications, HIPAA compliance, etc. So next, a little bit about privacy. I mean, our commitment to our customers is that the data is theirs and we will keep it private. We will never use their data or mine their data for any purpose. The only reason we're in business for this is for the purpose of providing a data solution for our customers, not for anything else. And then we're at the ISO slide for 27018. We are the first cloud provider really to adopt this practice of governance of cloud data. And that what it does is it really prohibits the use of any customer data for advertising or marketing purposes without the customer's express consent. And it also prevents the use of customers' data for purposes unrelated to providing the cloud service. So what this basically says is we are in this business strictly to provide infrastructure for our customers. We're not going to be using their data in any way. It is their data. And we're not going to be looking at it anything other than how to help provide that optimal service for them. Restricted data access. This is important too, that a customer's data is only accessed when necessary. This goes back to our Office 365 slide we had a little bit ago talking about how the user only has access to get to the data when they need to, and it's only provided for the limited amount of access that they need. We can do strong authentication, obviously multi-factor, to limit the access to only authorized personnel. Another thing we like to highlight is that the customer's data is their data. So when a customer utilizes Azure, they retain exclusive ownership of their data. They can control where the data is located. They can put role-based access controls on their data to determine who can access it. They can even go so far as to manage their own key encryption so that only they can see the data so that we don't have access to see it even if we wanted to. And then certainly if you want to get rid of the data, the customer is fully responsible for data destruction. Once they delete it, it is truly deleted. So the data storage and use. So this goes back to the transparency of where the data is. As more and more customers are looking at going to the cloud, there's some of them that still have hesitations because they feel they're losing control. They're losing the ability to know where their data's at, etc. Well, that's absolutely not the case. We can let the customers choose where their data is going to be stored, where it's going to be located. That's an important note to make with certain customers. We'll never use their data for advertising. And that we only use the data to provide services to our customers, not to use it for advertising or any other purposes. Real quickly on privacy, again, we talked about no advertising. We're fully transparent. We put controls in place for privacy. The one thing I'd like to hit on, because it's been in the news a lot, is in regard to law enforcement requests. So Microsoft does not disclose customer data to law enforcement unless it's directed by the customer or legally required. And even so, we will notify the customers when we're asked to disclose unless it's prohibited by law. So ultimately, this is saying we're not going to give any government unfettered access to our customers' data. If we do get any requests and we do a disclosure report of the previous 6 months' requests. However, this is assuming that we're not legally obligated not to report it. Microsoft doesn't provide any government with direct or unfettered access, as we mentioned. We only release specific data mandated by the government. They need to follow the appropriate legal processes. We get on to the next one here. As far as government snooping, here's kind of the high level of what you need to know. We don't provide any government direct access. We don't assist government's effort to break encryption or provide government with encryption keys. We don't engineer backdoors into our products. And if there's a bigger surveillance program out there, we aren't involved. In response to government or response to data requests, if we receive a demand for enterprise data, we'll only display or disclose this data when it's legally required. We'll notify the customer and provide a copy of the demand unless, again, we're legally prohibited from doing so. And we'll resist government demands that are invalid. And we back these up in our contracts. We'll go to court as necessary. And we have gone to court many times. And there's been some I'm sure you're aware of in the recent past that have been in the news. So in closing, before we open it up to questions, I just wanted to point out a couple resources. I highly recommend leveraging the Trust Center, leveraging the Office 365 blog. And the Trust Center, there's one for Office 365 and there's one for Azure as well. And we've got some white papers out there too on trust. And at this point, Barb, do you want to close us out and then we'll open it up for questions?
Absolutely. We're getting tight on time here. So we just kind of had some additional slides in here for you guys to use when you're presenting out to your customers too, just to kind of reiterate a lot of the information that we've told. We have a slide here that kind of showcases all of the different security credentials, again, that we have spent a lot of time and money getting that the customers and you as partners can take advantage of. And then we also have a list of some of the companies that you can talk about publicly that are utilizing the Microsoft Cloud now. So they know that they're going to be in good company if they decide to move forward with putting their data in the cloud. All right, so as we, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the IM window, and we can get to them. But I just want to make everyone aware that we have a couple of more office hours coming up here as we wrap up the end of our fiscal year. On 6/9, we're going to be doing Power BI. On 6/16, Outlook favorite features. And you guys can read the rest. I don't need to read them to you. But we also would love to have you guys take the quick survey that is in the chat window and let us know what you like, what you don't like, what do you want to see more of. If we continue this into the next fiscal year, are there certain topics that you would like to see? So please let us know your feedback so we can make this worthwhile for you.